I guess he's a riser. That's Dirk Bentley. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of AM Minnesota. We've got a phone guest today. It's a rarity these days when we put up all our shows up on YouTube, but I didn't want to miss out on this. Dave Farrow is our guest. He has been on the show before. He is, well, a two-time Guinness World Record holder in memory. We'll get to that in a moment, and we'll visit with Dave in just a moment. But first of all, I want to plug a couple of upcoming shows. Tomorrow, Carter Martin is our guest, Executive Director of the Paradise Center for the Arts here in Farrow, and Rice County Attorney John Fossum will visit with us. Our monthly visit with him comes your way on Friday. Rice County Habitat for Humanity has a couple of events coming up we'll discuss on Monday's AM Minnesota show. And a sure sign of spring being around the corner, John Dvorak will visit with Jerry on Tuesday's AM Minnesota program. Of course, he's the Executive Secretary of the Rice County Fair. So, yep, summer just around the corner. Dave Farrow, good morning to you.
Hey, thanks very much for having me on. This is great to be back on the show.
I know. You were here in 2008.
Oh, my God. We're that old. It's been a while.
It has been a while. So get us updated. What's happening with you these days, Dave?
Oh, okay. So first of all, for your listeners who don't remember me or weren't listening then, I should back it up a little bit.
Sure.
I am in the Guinness Book of World Records for memory. I've been on about 2,000 different shows like Dr. Oz, Steve Harvey, The Today Show, CNN, Fox, and one of the most requested guest expert on memory training in the world today. But the important thing is that what you don't know is that I was actually diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia when I was a kid, and I turned to memory training, or what we now refer to as brain hacks, to overcome the natural challenges that I had. And obviously with great success. I was able to get in the Guinness Book of Records, but now I've actually teach people all around the world. So when I was on your show last, I was actually just moving into the United States. I'm from Canada. So if you hear me say a boot or something like that, I apologize in advance because that's what Canadians do. The things have been absolutely incredible. Actually, right around 2008, I was a spokesperson for Sony Corporation and their Reader Revolution Challenge. But now we actually have memory tournaments. I have memory tournaments happening in several countries around the world now, about 7 different countries. And these are competitions that young people can get involved in. And what they do is they actually make a fun competition involving memory and memory techniques that simulates the stress involved of an exam, but does it in a very short chunk of time, so it's still fun. So the important thing to know about stress is that it's very good for you if it's in very short chunks of time. It's very bad for you if it's in very long bits of time because that wears on your body. But this actually helps train students to perform on tests better. It's been one of our greatest successes.
I'll be darned. We're going to learn more from Dave Farrow about, and hopefully he'll be able to give us some memory tips. He's got a system, of course, that you can purchase. His website is davefarrow.com. That's F-A-R-R-O-W, davefarrow.com. We got to take a market update here. If I forget that, I'll be out of a job, Dave, so we'll have to do that here in just a little bit. We'll have 20-plus minutes of nonstop banter about memory. I've got a number of questions for you that I probably even asked 6 years ago. I don't remember. I need to get your system, don't I?
There's a lot of little simple things that you can do right now that anybody can do to maximize their memory. And I also have a website that's easier to remember if you guys are getting off the call right now. You can check out more information at pushbuttonmemory.com. So pushbuttonmemory, as easy as pushing a button. It's really easy to remember. And if you didn't want to, spell my last name and everything.
Oh, sure. Pushbuttonmemory.com.
You got it. All right.
Sounds very interesting. Anyway, we'll be visiting more with Dave here in just a moment. We're going to get that opening market report first, courtesy of your KDHL Agri Boosters. Oh, where are you, Dave?
I'm actually in Buffalo, New York right now. That's where I've put down roots.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Buffalo, New York. You guys even get more snow than we get here in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah. No, remember Snowvember last year? It was a pride that we wore on our chest for a whole year. Like, no, we went through the Vietnam of snowstorms. That's what we did.
In fact, your assistant told me when I talked to her earlier today that you had a foot of snow yesterday.
Yeah, no, just a light sprinkling, just a foot. No big deal.
Yeah, no big.
Yeah.
A foot's nothing in Buffalo. Yeah. Dave Farrow.
That's just the primer. No, but we had some of the warmest weather for the past while. We had a green Christmas, so it was about due.
Yep. Dave Farrow is a memory expert, for lack of a better term. You've written some books on memory. Of course, you have a couple of world records in memory. I believe I read on your website you memorized 59 decks of cards.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my first world record. Well, actually, my first world record was 52 decks, and then the second one was 59. So, yeah, here's the record. You get 59 decks of playing cards. That's 3,068 cards in total. Shuffle them all together. It actually took 4 volunteers to fully shuffle them, and they used shuffling machines and everything. And it has to, all this has to be done on 2 cameras with 2 witnesses at all times. It's like Fort Knox. This is crazy. Just to get an idea of what it takes to get a Guinness record. And then I had to memorize them. Now, I was only allowed a single sighting. I could only see each card once. I could not have any repetition, and I had to have 2 witnesses and 2 cameras at all times when I did that to prove that there was no repetition. This is why this record is one of the toughest in memory, because there's no repetition involved. And I was allowed to I had to get less than 0.5% wrong. So that's approximately like 20 mistakes at the most out of 3,068 cards. And I got only 1 mistake. I was very proud of that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was deck number 17, card number 45. I was like, oh. But that one proves that it was real. It wasn't a magic trick. This is real effort. But the thing is that I did this to inspire people. Especially with my dyslexia, it was actually a real challenge, because I made this technique in my head to double check everything as I was decoding it, and that's actually how, when we start getting into talking about memory techniques. The one thing that your listeners probably don't realize, maybe a few people have read some books on this, but it's still kind of fuzzy. I'm here to say that your brain and your memory can be hacked, for lack of a better word. You can actually adjust and use your memory differently just by thinking about information differently. And to make it very simple, there's a mechanism in the brain. It's actually a natural survival mechanism, very well established. We know a lot about it. Based on a lot of the research I've done, I've been able to examine it even further. This mechanism allows you to memorize information with 0 repetition. So those things that stick in your head, that jingle on the radio, that sort of thing, a video that you see that you can't get out of your head, all those things, they are triggering this survival mechanism that actually used to be used to warn us about predators. I mean, obviously, if you needed repetition to remember where a predator was, well, you're probably not going to be on the planet very long, right?
Right. Yep.
So we have this natural mechanism. But what I've done is develop a system that's very simple, very easy to use, very turnkey, that anybody can use any information and trigger this mechanism by kind of essentially playing little mental games. And one of those tactics is called encoding and decoding, where you take information and you use little codes trying to translate it into something that your brain really enjoys. So numbers are very difficult for your brain to memorize, but I have a code that turns them into colors. That's like the most basic, simple explanation or example I can give. Obviously, there's more depth to it later on, but that gives you kind of an idea and allows us to, then we have the color code, then we can start to create some images and do some things that your brain really, really enjoys and really triggers the long-term memory, so that you remember it not for hours or minutes, but for weeks and months and years. I've had students that go up to me and they say they studied for 1 semester. Actually, this one student was crying. She was in her senior year, and she said that she was about to quit because she thought she would fail in her senior year. And she said that she had studied using my method in her first semester. Then she got back into her old habits into her second semester, and then they had an exam that tested her on both. And she did better on the stuff that she studied my way, a good 3 months earlier, and hadn't reviewed at all, than she had doing it her way. And then she was totally convinced. She used the Farrow method for everything, and her GPA went up, and she graduated with honors. She was very happy.
Wow. See, now the Kosfeld method, my method, back when I was going to broadcasting school and I was studying for my FCC exam, was to have a young lady. I had flashcards, basically, with some answers to some questions on the flashcards, and I memorized the flashcards, but it was due to repetition. You're saying your system is not a repetitive thing.
Yeah, it's not repetitive, and I don't know what if a young lady had anything to do with that in your case. That might have been an extra motivation factor for you there. But no, actually, repetition can really dull the brain. Certainly for some cramming, people can use it. There is a minor amount of repetition at the higher levels with our stuff. People will repeat things maybe 2 or 3 times just to make sure they're locked in. But this is a method to bypass short-term memory without repetition. So I'll give you an example. Say if you saw a car accident, you could go throughout your whole day, your whole year, and somebody asks you about that car accident, you would still remember a tremendous amount of detail. And the interesting thing is, it's absurd to even think that you'd need tow trucks to pull those cars apart and crash them into each other 100 times in order for you to remember the details of it. So your brain and your memory is perfectly capable of memorizing things with 0 repetition, effortlessly, instantaneously, the very first time you see them. The problem is that most of our information that we want to memorize, like names and academia, numbers, things like that, is not in a form that our brain really does this very well. So that's essentially the challenge, is that our brain has different rules that it plays by than we do in our civilized world, and my system is there to bridge the gap.
See, it seems to me that you have a gift. You've been blessed with a gift. I mean, I can't imagine the average human being able to memorize 59 decks of cards.
Oh, well, it does take a lot of practice to get to that. But I can actually show you a quick technique here.
Sure.
How much time do we have before the next break?
Oh, we don't have any more breaks. We got 15 minutes.
Okay, great, good. Okay, so let's do a standard test for memory. We'll put your listeners through it, but I'm afraid you're the one on the air, so I may actually be testing you.
Yeah, I'm the guinea pig. That's okay. I'm very good at flunking tests, so there you go.
Oh, I think you'll do great at this. So I actually looked into our calendar, and I think I may actually have a list that, did we do a memory test with a list when I was on your show? Do you remember it all?
I don't remember. That's been 6 years ago. It's been 8 years ago.
I think I have the list that I was using around that time. So let's give it a try. See if anything jogs your memory.
I doubt that highly.
Here we go. Okay, so if I were to test your memory, if I was a doctor testing your memory, let's say, and you were worried about dementia or something like that.
No, I'm not going to be thrown. Now, wait a minute here, Dave. I'm not going to be thrown in a nursing home.
You're not going to be thrown under the bus. You're not thrown under the bus. You're going to look great at the end of this.
Some dementia unit because I'm not remembering this.
No, but if somebody were to test you, the general consensus would be that they would give you a list of random objects. It seems to be the most common method for testing standard memory right out of the gate. So what it means is that if I were to test you, I would give you a list of random objects, like ordinary things like mouse pad and dog and tripod and door, something like that. And then I would ask you, how many do you remember? After distracting you a little bit, maybe with medical questions, I'd give you 10 of these, and then I'd say, how many do you remember? Most people would remember about 4 or 5. That's a perfectly healthy memory without any extra techniques, without any undue repetition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a list that I have here, a standard list that I've used in memory labs before, and it's completely randomized by a computer, but I just like it because I made a fun story out of it. And then I'm going to tell you basically, I'm going to open up my brain and tell you the story that I made in my head, and you're probably going to remember the entire list. Now, the story doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have any plot to it, but it'll give you an idea of what actually triggers your long-term memory. And this is obviously the tip of the iceberg here. But I wanted to give you something that you could take home with. Anybody who's listening right now, if you have kids, who are capable of B's and A's and they're getting C's and D's, do this exercise with them. If you have somebody who's hyper creative, but they don't seem as focused, then I strongly suggest you take a look at my system, but do this this fun little game with them, and I think you'll see a light bulb go on.
I can't write this down, right? This has to be from memory.
You don't write this down.
Okay.
You don't write this down. Okay. So the list is pretty simple. It's a tree, a car, a cat, an umbrella, a swimming pool, an elephant of all things, your local bank, orange juice, cell phone, and chocolate. Okay. And I'll even add one more in there. I'll put in an alligator at the end, okay? So if I were to test you on that, how many do you think you remember?
Oh, maybe a couple.
Yeah. All right. So here's how we would make this story. Now, again, I use the word story loosely because a proper memory technique is not just a story. What you want to do is make imagery that uses all of your senses and makes it really, really interesting, but also connects information together. So, number one, we have a tree and a car. So I would imagine a tree outside your front door, and your car crashes into it. So imagine someone's driving your car, and they crash into this tree. Can you picture that?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So the car door opens, the driver door opens, and you want to find out who's been driving. It turns out it was a cat. And I think you remember an SNL skit about, Toonces the driving cat, if anybody thinks back that far. So we have tree, car, and cat already in one image, and that's pretty easy to remember. You don't have to repeat it a ton of times. It just triggers your memory because it's interesting. So let's keep going. The cat grabs the umbrella, which is the next item. Now, if it was a different item, he'd grab something else, but, umbrella is the next item. So he grabs an umbrella, and I just picture him kind of flying up in the air like Mary Poppins and landing in a swimming pool. So we have the cat to the umbrella.
And there's the alligator right in the swimming pool, right?
Well, you got things out of order a little bit. The elephant is sitting in the swimming pool.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Just visualize it clearly and imagine the umbrella to the swimming pool to the elephant that's sitting in the swimming pool. But hey, now you have this great memory, so you won't forget. So the elephant gets spooked and charges out of the swimming pool and starts running towards your local bank and starts tearing up things. And the next thing in the list is orange juice, cell phone, and chocolate, and then alligator. So the way I would picture this is, we went from the umbrella to the swimming pool. In the swimming pool was the elephant. The elephant went into the bank. I would imagine there's a giant vat of orange juice sitting in the bank that gets knocked over in all of the craziness. So now we have bank to orange juice. And then the orange juice splashes all over a bunch of people's cell phones, and just electricity starts arcing through the air for some reason. But you pull your cell phone back. You hold it up against your ear, but then you realize that it's turned magically into chocolate. So we have orange juice, cell phone, and chocolate in order. And then finally, alligator. So what would you do with the chocolate and alligator? Maybe feed an alligator chocolate so that he stays away from you, or the alligator snatches the chocolate out of your hand?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So on the surface, this is a really silly story. It seems very, very juvenile. It seems something you could do with kids. That's why it works, folks. Don't fight how your brain works. If you have somebody who is a daydreamer, is creative, and they're having difficulty with schoolwork, K through 12, they can be the smartest one in their class if they learn how to use and harness that creativity. And I know because I did it. I was at the bottom of all my classes, and I went to the top of all of them by harnessing this tool. And that was then was nothing compared to what I know now. All right, so do you mind if we test you a little bit, if we put you on the spot?
Oh, let's go for it.
All right, so the first item in the list was, can you help you out with that? Do you remember what it was?
That was a tree.
It's a tree, and what hit the tree?
The car.
And what came out of the car?
The cat that was driving the car.
There you go. And then what did the cat do? It grabbed something?
Yeah, grabs an umbrella, goes up like Mary Poppins, ends up landing in a pool with an elephant in it.
There you go.
The elephant
to the...
Yeah, the elephant ends up walking in the local bank.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Orange juice, somehow.
There you go.
I forget how we ended up with the orange juice in the bank, but it was there. And then there was a cell phone.
But the visual image reminded you.
Yeah, that's probably it. The cell phone magically turned into chocolate, and we fed the...
There you go.
We for some reason, there was an alligator that must like orange juice that was there and got the chocolate, and then it got, you know what happens when you eat too much chocolate. Well, that was the end of the end.
Sick, yeah.
That was the end of the alligator. So I embellished your story a little bit, but I understand what you're saying. When you correlate each of these items with a story, it's easier to remember.
Absolutely. And this is what your brain is trying to do, by the way. Every single time you hear a person's, if you ever hear nicknames are created because your brain is trying to come up with something it can picture or visualize for a person's name. And when you call Michael Mike and you think of a microphone, that's your brain trying to make sense of it because there's no according to the rules that your brain runs, the word Michael doesn't mean anything. It's a gibberish conglomeration of sounds. It's not like desk or chair or something you can visualize. So your brain operates by your senses. So visual is one of them, but also your other senses as well. And when you have information that is not in terms of your senses, it's very difficult to memorize unless you do some sort of encoding and technique, and then it becomes incredibly easy. I mean, it seems like a magic trick, or it seems like superpowers, but it's just understanding that your brain likes certain information and doesn't like it in other forms.
So to remember names, I'm horrible. I mean, absolutely horrible at remembering names. People tell me all the time, well, we remember names all the time because I do play-by-play on the radio, but I say, hey, they're numbers correlated with the names. It's a whole different game there. You know, I can memorize a number to a name, but I can't. You know, not everybody has a name, a number on their back. So I'll meet some, I'll meet some interesting woman that I'd like to maybe get to know, and I won't remember her name the next time I see her. And of course, you don't want to go up to her and say, hey, you. So, how do you have a tip on how I can remember names?
Yes, Gordy, I will help you with the young ladies, I promise. Well, one of the things about the numbers on the names, that might confuse some people because I just said that numbers are difficult to memorize, but one of the principles of memory is also organization. So you notice when we did that list, we had, the one thing was connected to the next thing, connected to the next thing, connected to the next. It's not all in one big picture. So your brain really likes things when they are organized and sequential. So numbers help do that for names. So that shows a little bit why it's a little bit easier. But absolutely, for names, one of the tricks we use is a substitute word idea. Essentially, your brain already has a whole bunch of words in it that sound similar to what you're trying to memorize. So it's kind of like the nickname thing that, your brain already has all the syllables necessary to interpret the world, but it just hasn't organized it. So here's what I mean. My last name is Farrow, spelled F-A-R-R-O-W. I'm not Egyptian, but for some reason when I put on an Egyptian Pharaoh hat when I'm on stage, and you can see it on my website as well, I put on this silly hat, people never forget my name, and that's because I've connected my name to my face in that way. Now, not everybody has a name that's as easy to connect, but in almost every case we can come up with something that gives you a hint for the name. So for Gordy, I can think of a gourd, for Halloween. And what you start to do is, as you practice this technique, you start to come up with your own coding. So you can do it for any name you encounter. And I actually have a method in my system that breaks it down even further into syllables. So you can handle names from other languages, entire foreign language vocabulary, things like that.
Okay, so if I meet let's say the woman's name is Anne, what would you use for a correlation with Anne?
Well, I'd think of Anne of Green Gables, personally. Part of the technique is also training yourself to think of your first thought. One of the biggest problems, now I'm giving a lot of information here, so I apologize if I overwhelm anybody. They can check out pushbuttonmemory.com if you want to find out more. But I'm just going to kind of keep on going and give you all the information because I know that you're a big lover of this stuff. So one of the things that I teach actually is that if you overthink it, you actually hurt your memory. So if I stop and I think, oh, Anne, what's the perfect association for that? And I think of a million different ones, and I spend all this time. The funny thing is, it actually works counter to me being more likely to remember it because I'm associating too many things to the word Anne. If I start training myself, and we have specific exercises for this, train myself to think of my first impression. The minute I hear the name, the minute I shake that hand, the first impression I think of this technique, immediately I lock in that name and don't forget it.
I thought maybe you were going to give me this tip. Let's say Anne has a freckle on her nose. I remember the freckle on her nose and correlate that with Anne.
Well, now that is kind of an older way of doing it, and I will tell you that it doesn't work as well as starting with the name. So you don't start with the face. That's our first instinct. If you start with the name and then connect it to the face, then you'll be okay. So if I had Anne of Green Gables, for example, I don't know if anybody's a fan, but I'm a big fan of that, being from Canada. But I mean, you could think of other things for Little Orphan Annie or something like that. For Anne of Green Gables, there's like red braids. So if you imagine a red braid coming out of that freckle or something like that, then that would stick But my point is you start with the names. There have been some people who taught memory techniques in the past that it really wasn't taught as well and as effectively. Actually, I should tell you, one of the differences that we've done since 2008 is my Farrow method actually has been verified in a double-blind neuroscience study at McGill University. So it's a very prestigious double-blind study that actually proves that it works better than other training methods for memory. We were talking earlier about how Lumosity was attacked recently and fined because they kind of fudged a lot of their science. I've been essentially trying to fight against that for a long time and tell people that a lot of these brain games are very useless. They rely on repetition. You could show on a chart that you get better incrementally over time, but anything that you do repetitively you get better at, that doesn't mean you're improving your memory. That means you're getting better at the game. So if you want to get better at games all day, play games. But if you want to get better at memory, learn how your memory actually works and learn the best strategy for it, and then you can use it.
Some days the show is not long enough. Today is one of them. We only have a little over a minute left. Does this work at all age levels? I mean, if I'm an elderly person, does it work?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've worked with quite a few people in the senior community. In fact, I'm going to be speaking at a big symposium, a big conference for seniors, 55 plus. And this year, actually, I'm working with a neurologist in Maine. We're putting together a pilot study on the Farrow method for people who have early onset dementia as a preventative treatment. So some very, very exciting stuff coming up to come. But yeah, the principle of brain plasticity is pretty simple. We know that if you exercise it, it will get stronger and better. But here's the main point. If you just do Sudoku or crosswords, you're only going to get better at Sudoku and crosswords. If you actually want a better memory, you have to memorize something and then recall it. You have to do the task that you want to get better at.
All right.
What I do is show you how to make memory and recalling much easier than you ever thought possible.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. Pushbuttonmemory.com, right?
Pushbuttonmemory.com.
All right.
Thank you very much.
That concludes today's edition of AM Minnesota. Always interesting visiting with Dave. Maybe we can book him again sometime because I don't know about you, but I'm totally fascinated. KDHLAM, Farrow, Minnesota.
From ABC News, I'm Scott Goldberg.